So I'm just here with Livio at the Sonus Faber factory, and it's been a wonderful experience so far. Livio's been very, very kind to give us some time. So, Livio, I just wanted to ask you some questions. So, you are the leader of the industrial design team at the McIntosh Group. Did you study industrial design? Was that your background?
Sure. I studied industrial design in Milan back in 2001.
What made you decide to do that?
I was always in love with doing things, and I had a great ability to draw and to imagine things, and so my passion was about stereo equipment and toys, and
Wow.
so I decided to do this.
How long is the program, the educational program for industrial design?
It's 3 years.
Oh.
3 years, yes.
So when you were, after you graduated, what was among the first things that you designed that you're particularly happy or proud of?
My first job was with Lego company, the
You're
toy
kidding?
company. Yeah.
Lego?
Yes.
Wow.
And so this was my first dream that came true, because I was a big Lego fan. And I'm still a big Lego fan.
And this was in Italy?
Yes.
With Lego Italy?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
They had a creative studio in Milan.
Oh, okay.
A beautiful place in the city center, and so I started to work there in 2005.
So what did you do for Lego? I mean,
we were responsible for the preschooler part of the catalog, so Duplo, the big blocks.
okay. And how long were you with Lego then?
I spent 2 years and a half with Lego.
Yeah. And so you said that you were always intrigued by audio. So at what point did you start working in the audio industry?
Basically, I started immediately to work with audio industry, because I started to make some little works during the weekend for a small Italian manufacturer.
So you were doing designs and drawings for
Yeah.
enclosures and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
then something happened during the process. I met the previous CEO of the company, and he wanted me to join Sonus
Okay.
Faber.
So what year was that approximately?
It was 2010.
Oh, so it's about less than about 8 years.
Yeah.
8 years ago. So that's when you met Mario.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right. And so he saw your designs and said, "Wow, I really like this."
It was not so easy.
Okay.
Because we had some conversation, and I showed him some project, but he was searching for something specific. So I made some new renderings for him during that time, and he was happy with that, and so we started to work together.
So was that what led to the AIDA project, the renderings?
Basically, yes. The very first project that we started to do together was the big AIDA, and but then the company was already in the process to do the new Amati in that moment. So the official first project on the market was the Amati Futura.
But you were not involved with the Amati Futura?
No, I was involved.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I was. Yeah. That was my very first project here. But 1 year before, I already started to make some concept for the AIDA.
I see.
So the AIDA was a little bit longer as a process.
So when you joined the group at the time, were you already familiar with Sonus Faber?
Sure.
Okay. And what did you think of the company as far as at the time the aesthetics? Because you're coming in to fill very big shoes. You know, a company that already had a tremendously established tradition of using natural materials, wood. People all over the world who loved what Sonus Faber stood for. You know, handcrafted elegance, a beauty and sound that a lot of speakers did not have. So you now step into these big shoes.
Yeah, sure.
How did you feel about that?
Honestly, very good, because there are not a lot of company in the audio business that really understand about industrial design.
Yes.
And so I recognize the positive part of that big shoes. That the thing that made Sonus Faber different from the other companies. So the culture of industrial design. There was a very deep industrial design culture inside the company. So all the employees already knows the importance of a good industrial design, and so for me was really easy to work with them. Of course, the history of Sonus Faber is very strong. The founder of the company had a very clear and peculiar vision about the products, but I think it's the Sonus Faber way to approach the product is more important than some specific industrial design styles. It's important to understand that there is a big Italian culture behind the company, and you had to interpret that. You don't have to create something new from scratch.
So when you came on board, by then I think Franco Serblin had already sold the company for a number of years. So I presume there was an existing group of industrial designers or one particular person that was responsible for continuing that tradition before you were brought in to oversee that group?
Not really, because Franco was a kind of one-man band, and he was responsible. He was the creator of everything inside the company.
So after he left, those models continued for a number of years, and then you stepped in. Is that
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Between me and Franco, there was maybe 2 or 3 different design consultant studio outside the company that tried to create something to continue the tradition, but unfortunately was not. Mauro at that time was not satisfied by that result.
So those products were never brought to the market. Okay, so basically it was Franco and then it's you.
Basically, yes.
Oh wow.
Yes,
okay.
But there was a guy in the engineering department, Gianni, that left the company. He retired just 1 month ago, and this guy was the guy who worked with Franco since the beginning, and his knowledge was exactly what I used to interpret it in the right way, the philosophy of the company.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you has been very intriguing to me. In other industries, when you have an industrial designer, oftentimes they come into that industry with an idea of what they want to see in terms of the look and the execution, but in fact, what they know about industrial design may have very little to actually do with the function of that product. So for example, a car could be absolutely gorgeous, but then when it comes to aerodynamics, it could be terrible.
Sure.
How was that in your case? It seems to me like your designs complement the audio part rather than fight with the audio part. And when I've asked in the past other manufacturers, why don't you get involved with the industrial designers? They've often told me that's because it's too hard to teach an industrial designer what we need from an end result standpoint. So how was that different for you? Why is it that yours has been such a successful career with Sonus Faber?
First of all, I think that a good industrial design has to know the limits of the product who is designing. That's the basic rule of an industrial design, a well-done industrial design process. But in my case, I think the most important things was that, as I said to you, I was passionate about the products, and when I was young, my father has a shop in Sicily, a hi-fi shop, and so I grew up surrounded by these products. So it was easy for me to understand the rules, really easy. And Paolo was really patient with me to teach me and to explain me why some solutions were bad and some other solutions right.
Bad?
yeah. We had some fight during these years. Yeah.
Any scars?
It's
Nothing
better
what to show. So when you are looking to update an existing model, what do you consider? What do you have to think of to make it fresh, and yet at the same time still retain the heritage? So, for example, your latest creations with the Electra Amator 3 or the Guarneri, the current Guarneri versions. I mean, during the visit here, on one wall we see every model of the Guarneri, and it was fascinating because I've actually owned every model except for the Futura.
Okay.
And it's fascinating to see the evolution of the Guarneri, where the original was very simply just wood and leather and stone base, and then how when you came in you started to mix the use of metal, and how that use of metal made it extremely contemporary, and yet it paid homage to the previous design. How do you create that tension, if you will?
There is a specific process in the industrial design development that makes the base for that, and we follow some rules, of course, to create mood boards, and then the list of the elements that we want to involve in every creation, and then the weight of these different elements in the product. But at the end, I think it's a matter of sensitivity, and everything that surrounds us in some way inspires us as a designers, and at the end it's something that came really natural, I have to say. The basic thing is to understand the brand philosophy, and the brand philosophy was always focused on use specific materials for the right function. For example, solid wood, and so when we had to introduce aluminium, we wanted to use the aluminium in the same with the same spirit Franco used the wood in the past. So we look at the function first of all, and then we wanted to capture the real essence of the material, using it in the right way.
And so when you have a design, who signs off on it? Are you ultimately the final arbiter that says that's the design, we're going with that, assuming that everything else is good? In other words, it works well with the audio part of it and so on, or is it a design by committee?
It's changed. It's changed a lot in the last year. The current CEO of the group and of Sonus Faber, Jeff, it's really about this community of people that takes a decision all together, and I really like this process. So in the last year, everything was approved by a pool of people that really knows the spirit of the company. So sales guys and marketing and production, everyone is involved in the process.
And how do you and Paolo work together? Paolo being Paolo Tetson, the director, or I guess the lead designer for the acoustics part of it. How do you guys work together? How does a project get started? Does he come to you and say, okay, we need this particular speaker? It generally has to be a 2-way bookshelf or a 3.5-way floor stander. Or do you go to him and you say, okay, I've got this idea for the speaker. How does that start?
It can happen in two different ways, as you said. Sometimes we had crazy ideas. We go in the other building and we show to Paolo, and he said, no, this is not possible.
Are you out of your mind?
Exactly. But then we find the right compromise. Or when we have some specific brief from CEO or from
the marketing department,
we discuss together. The very first document is made by him, usually with dimensions and number of drivers, dimension of drivers, volumes, and then we create the right architecture for the product. But as I said, sometimes it happens that we have ideas, we do prototypes and mock-ups, and then we say to Paolo, okay, test it and try if...
So is there an example of that particular situation? Did it come to market?
Electa is a good example of that.
Really?
Electa was not a request from the market, was something that was always in our mind, because we always look to do a re-edition of something iconic. And so the process started in a very passionate way.
In other words, he didn't want to do it and you wanted to do it.
No, I have to say that the enthusiasm was from both sides. But for example, we proposed to Paolo to use the marble, and was the first time we used a stone in a speaker. And of course, he told us the right volumes, the right enclosure for each driver. It was a good teamwork. I think that product represents very well the Sonus Faber of today, and also the real Sonus Faber spirit.
Was that also the same process with the Extrema, the reissue of the Extrema?
Yeah, the Extrema was really similar to that. A little bit more crazy maybe, because at that time the request from Mauro was to create something really extreme in every way. Carbon fiber was never been approached by Sonus Faber before. We had beryllium and a lot of new materials to play with. And so it was a little bit more, let me say, hard to make the Extrema. Electa was more fluid as a process.
Your job, by definition, invites criticism, feedback from audiophiles, music lovers, and buyers all over the world, because just by definition, Sonus Faber is so unique as a company in our industry. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, our industry in general produces wonderful sound, but generally not very good looking products. So when you produce a product and you get feedback, do you pay attention to that feedback? Does it bother you if it's negative? How do you deal with that?
It really changed year by year with experience. The first years were a little bit difficult for me. As I said, I was an audiophile, and so I was familiar with a lot of forums and groups on Facebooks and socials. And so the very first reaction on something different on the Sonus Faber brands were not always positive, and I was a little bit frustrated by that. But then with the experience, year by year, I understood that this was normal. We cannot be perfect, and there is always someone that doesn't like our job, our work. It's as a designer, you have to take a direction, and that is your direction. It's a compromise with the company for sure, but it's your decision at the end. And so I'm comfortable with that.
You have a thicker skin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So far we've talked predominantly about Sonus Faber, but you're in fact the lead designer for the entire McIntosh Group for all their products, such as Audio Research and Wadia and so on. So how is it different, or is it different, designing for those products as it is for Sonus Faber?
Oh, the roots are the same. I mean, the process is exactly the same. The thing that really changes is the spirit when you approach to Sonus Faber instead of Audio Research. Of course, there are. I have to say that in this industry, the products are really connected to the personality of the original founder. All these companies are originated by a dreamer, a very visionary engineer sometime.
So were you familiar originally with audio research
Sure.
before you joined McIntosh Group?
I have to say that honestly was my favorite brand. And when I had the first discussion with Mauro, one of the first thing that I showed to him was a concept for audio research, not for Sonus Faber. Audio research was always a brand that I had in my heart, and I think I understood pretty well the philosophy behind the brand. And in this year I had the opportunity to work with the people that made the products, and my love for audio research is still very hard.
Well, that's fantastic. I remember when the Galileo series first came out, and of course you were responsible for the aesthetics, the visuals, and a few of my friends who have been lifelong audio research fans, almost exactly half said they loved it, they loved the movement towards the new, and almost the exact half said, oh, they hated it, they missed the toggle switches, they missed the solid face plates, and so on. And I remember thinking that I guess this is just how it is. You'll always have a certain number of people who will love it and other people who won't.
Exactly that. I mean, we approached the Galileo line as a concept car. At the beginning of the process, we wanted to try to do something different using the original element of the brand. Then the result was internally so well appreciated that we decided to go on the market with that, and then after the Galileo line, we had the opportunity to take some of the elements of the Galileo and makes the new reference line, the foundation line from that, and was a really interesting products and process. That was the case where I had a lot of critics on the forums, and yeah.
Now you've also started to show your work with McIntosh. So, what are some of the models that your work has started to show up on with the McIntosh models?
Basically, until now, we made some active products like the wireless speakers, the RS100. We made a small turntable, the new MT2. And of course, we made the big flagship loudspeaker, the XRT. And now I'm pretty happy because we are starting to work pretty well with McIntosh, with Charlie and the guys, with Chris and Pete, working on some details of the amplifiers. Of course, there is a lot of legacy there, and it's really difficult to touch that product in the proper way. So we are doing step by step, and I like it. It's the proper way to do it.
Name some companies whose designs you admire.
In the audio industry?
In the audio world, yes.
I always loved the creation of Lawrence Dickey, the designer of the Nautilus, and now the Vivid main designers. I have to say that a lot of company did a great job in the past creating the image of the brand, like Mark Levinson. I have some old Micromega CD players. I always like the creation of the Japanese company, in particular Sony and Yamaha. I think they made great design in the past, and they are still doing some interesting things. There are a lot of interesting company. I like, for example, what Name is doing with electronics.
Okay.
Really like it.
Last few questions. What do you think Sonus Faber does better than anybody?
Everything.
Good answer. Number 2, Mies van der Rohe or Louis XV?
Van der Rohe, I think.
Okay. Tesla or Ferrari?
Tesla.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to you.